Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Legends of Zegen. I'm so excited once again to be bringing forth another legend that you guys are going to be extremely entertained to hear from today. This guy is incredible. He is a Paralympian, an Olympian, an entrepreneur. He's a family man, and he's a DJ. I cannot wait to introduce you guys. So without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to introduce you to Craig Blanchette. Craig, how are you doing today?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's our post Thanksgiving, Black Friday special podcast, right? And
It is, yes.
or at least when we're recording. But no, it's great. I'm looking forward to the conversation and just sharing some of my life experiences and getting to know you a bit better, and going to enjoy the time.
No, this is going to be fantastic. So, Craig, you do all of those things that I mentioned. You're a Paralympian, an Olympian, entrepreneur, a DJ, and you do all of this from a wheelchair, which I think is wicked cool for many, many reasons. But the fact that you just do those things regardless of a wheelchair
Right.
or not is still incredible. But for just a little bit of context for folks, you were basically born and had to, well, everybody's born, but you were born into a wheelchair. You
I was
ended
born
up
too. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So
yeah,
give us a little bit of
it's kind of a
history.
tricky language there because obviously, when you say born into a wheelchair, I'm just going to play with that joke a little bit because there's a joke to be had there. But yeah, that would have been challenging, in the delivery room, and you have a wheelchair, waiting for me to catch me, right?
Just a little baby wheelchair.
Yeah, a little baby wheelchair. But no, so essentially, if you were to, it looks like I'm an above the knee amputee. So technically, I didn't have amputations. If you were to look at your, everybody thinks about their own body. So if you close your eyes and you think about, I've got, my hips, and then I've got this bone or this, your thigh, and then you got your knee. And then from your knee, you've got two bones that go down to your ankle, right? And so if you were to take that femur bone, which goes between your hip and your knee, and you were make that 1 inch long. So you'd essentially have your hip joint with a very small femur, and then the knee joint. And then you'd have your fibula, tibia and fibula, right? So those are the two bones that go from your knee to your ankle. And so if you basically just take out your thigh, your big quads, all that kind of stuff, and you just move that upstream, that's essentially what I have. So I have feet. My feet weren't fully formed, but they, I've got a heel and I've got, feet. And then, but one of the challenges, so imagine your hip socket is like a hinge and your knee socket is like a hinge, and your hip goes forward, like when you sit down, but then you stand up and it's straight, but then you even have some motion beyond straight,
The
back
other way.
a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, everybody has a little bit of that. And then your knee pretty much goes one direction, right? So imagine having both of those hinges right next to each other. Talk about instability, right?
Sure.
So you got your hip doing its thing and you got your knee doing its thing, and it's just all like crazy unstable. So what they did is they fused the knee joint. So they basically made the knee so it couldn't bend. And so then whatever I had in the hip was what I had. So it allowed me to stand. It allowed me to, weight bear, things like that. I used artificial legs for a time, so I could walk around. But my hips aren't fully formed like your hips. And so weight bearing was not a comfortable thing. Didn't have full range of motion and all that. So it turned out that for me and the active lifestyle that I wanted to live, and I don't know even how much wear and tear my hips would have handled years of walking. Even
Sure.
normal hips wear out, right? And so I found that the wheelchair, well, early on it was a skateboard, but something with wheels on it allowed me to sit on it and move faster. And so I had a skateboard first, then I graduated to a wheelchair. Well, it was like a skateboard / artificial legs. And then it was a wheelchair / artificial legs. And then it just became the skateboard and wheelchair, mostly wheelchair. And so I move around in a what we call an everyday wheelchair. That's like you have specialty shoes and you have everyday shoes. Well, we have specialty wheelchairs and then we have everyday wheelchairs. And so an everyday wheelchairs is built for comfort. It's built for a kind of general all-purpose. And then I have racing wheelchairs, and then I have, racing hand cycles, and I have all of these other specialty types of devices that would be like specialty shoes or specialty gear, ski boots or running shoes or track spikes or whatever you might say. And so my everyday chair is what I get around most of the time, and it takes the pressure off of my shoulders, having to do a lot of the carrying me around. Sure. But then your butt is not built to sit on 24 hours a day or, a long day. So you have these really specialty cushions that you sit on because your butt gets tired of being sat on, and I sit most of the day.
Yeah,
so
of course.
All of those little special details. The nice thing, or one of my advantages, is I don't have paralysis and my plumbing works normal.
That's great news.
It's great news. Yeah.
For you.
And so for having kids, for going to the bathroom, for all those kind of things, when you got normal plumbing, you got an advantage over someone that's paralyzed where their plumbing doesn't work and they can't regulate blood pressure and they have to use devices to help them go to the bathroom. And there's all that kind of stuff. So pretty much I'm missing some femurs. The rest of it works pretty good. So
that's interesting. I didn't realize that there were, like you had mentioned, specialty chairs, right, for purpose-driven use, I would imagine, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're, off-roading or, like you said, right, racing chairs.
Well, you've seen probably Wheels, Aaron Fotheringham, the guy that does the backflips and all the crazy nitro circus stuff. Yeah, his wheelchair is built for that kind of crazy stuff, right? It's got suspension and it's built to be very stable. Obviously, it's got a lot of reinforcement for when he crashes and stuff, but he may still use that as an everyday chair, but he might have another chair he uses for every day, and that's like his acrobatics chair, things like that. They even have it's called Wheelchair MX, and so they'll take a special wheelchair and they'll go to a skate park. And they'll grind a rail. And so they got special stuff underneath it so you can have a grinding surface and, little suspension things. And yeah, it's amazing all the different adaptive equipment that's out there, from, snow skiing to water skiing to mountain biking to even skate parks.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's cool, the technology, how far it's come. I mean, I'm assuming, right, just based on what you're telling me, right, you started out with a skateboard.
Yeah.
And then
low tech, but pretty common.
Sure.
My uncle borrowed my uncle's. I was, was I like 2 or 5 years old, whatever. And my uncle had this cool plastic skateboard. And I'm like, what's that? Let's ride on that thing,
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, yes. And to your point too, like it gave you the ability to move around much faster, which, certainly we're going to get into this, right? But I feel like you are a guy who likes to go fast, and in whatever realm you can get to that experience, you're going to try to do it.
Did you just hear Ricky Bobby in your head? I want to go fast. I want to go fast. I heard it in my head just now. I want to go fast. I want to go fast.
Exactly. You're a young Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So I know that, this is something that you probably get asked a lot, is just the elements of being in a wheelchair. And I don't want to, I guess, kind of beat a dead horse in regards to asking these very common questions that you get. So I do want to ask you some, I guess, more different questions. And we got to chat a little bit, prior to this podcast.
We can go down the rate because it is interesting. I mean, someone's life that seems to be productive, that has some adaptive qualities to it. And for me, I've never known what it's like to live in a different body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a younger body, sure.
Right.
At times a more fit body, at times a less fit body. There's all of that stuff going on for sure. But this is the one body that I've known, and it hasn't changed significantly since I was born, right? Less hair,
Yeah.
a little more gray. Have you noticed as you get older, you have certain hair starts growing out of your ears? Well, that's weird, So there's these things that happen in my body, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same body I've had, right? And same with you. Sometimes kids will come up to me and they'll say, "What's it like not to have legs?" And I'll say, "What's it like to have arms?" And they'll look at me like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I noticed you have arms. What's it like?" And they're like, "Normal?" I said, "Exactly. That's what it's like for me. It's normal. Like it's having those big long legs that you seem to walk around on is kind of weird to me." And I know you're just thinking, this is the equipment I was born with. This is just it. And I'm thinking, yeah, but they seem kind of long. Don't they get in the way? Because I wasn't born with those type of legs. And so the reality is when you think about your experience is your experience is your experience. I grew up in this body. I grew up learning how to do certain things. My techniques probably are a little bit modified from the, certain things that you do going up and down stairs. It looks different when I go up and down stairs, but I go up and down stairs. And so we all figure out how to navigate our world with the bodies that we have and the lessons that we learn, and we figure stuff out. And I think that actually has equipped me to do a lot of the things that I've done in my life because there's kind of a motto that I have. Instead of saying I can't, if there's something that I want to do, but it seems like it's going to be really hard or unachievable, I could stop at, well, I can't do that because I don't have XYZ. Mm-hmm. Or you can shift the script in your head, and I recommend you all try this on for size. Change it from I can't to how can I? So first you have to decide, do I want it? Yes or no? If I do want it, well then stop saying I can't. And I don't know if you will, but if you ask the question, how can I? You'll open yourself to a whole new world of ideas because your brain will start to solve the problem. It's like, well, I want a new iPhone, but I can't afford it. Okay, well, what if you change that? I want a new iPhone. How can I afford it? Well, what if you sold your old one and the iPhone 14 and the 13 and the 12 that you had in your closet that you aren't even using? And what if you canceled a subscription on this or that? What if you figured it out? Sure. Then you're going to have the iPhone. You're going to have the thing based upon the how can I approach rather than the I can't approach.
Sure. Creating solutions for yourself rather than problems or blockers.
Barriers. Yeah. You have a barrier. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And the saying is, I can't never did anything. And it's true.
Yes. I completely agree. No, that's great advice. Man, I knew you were going to come straight out the gate with some good words of wisdom, man. You did it. That's it. We can end the episode right now.
Good.
No, but I think that's interesting when you talk about how it's just normal for you to be in a wheelchair, and that's all you've ever known, right? Or not having the use of your legs as a person who like me who does.
Yeah.
And so
we'll call you average.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, so, is there a term in the wheelchair community that you call people who are, they're just averages?
Yeah, we do. A buddy of mine, his name's Scott Hollenbeck, and he used to be just a big competitor of mine, and he's such a blessing to me. We're good friends now, but so the term is disabled or able-bodied. Those are kind of the
Able-bodied, right?
generic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he added temporarily, because you're temporarily able-bodied because you're going to get old and one day you're not going to be as able as you used to be. So he calls them a tab, or temporarily able-bodied. And I just think it's kind of funny and it's enjoyable. But yeah, so ultimately, yeah, able-bodied or temporary able-bodied or just, your average walking person. But we all have things that you look at somebody like Joe Rogan, for example, and he's this massive hunk of muscle and brilliant brain and cool stuff, right? I wouldn't say he's average at all. I would say he's extraordinary, right? But he's got legs that are kind of similar to yours and kind of normal, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's everything in, I guess, comparatively speaking, yes, we have a lot of similarities physically. Well, okay, maybe not physically. I'm nowhere near as fit as he is, and
Right.
maybe I need to start using a sauna more or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all that to be said, I think it's interesting, the parallels too, and the differences and the uniqueness of of being, I guess, disabled versus temporarily able-bodied tab.
Yeah.
I love that term. But one of the things that we had talked about previously was, I guess, some of the unique differences, things that you don't think about, right? And you had brought it up, and I love this question, so I'm going to ask you. But when you dream, do you dream with legs? Like when you dream, do you run around? It's something that I find fascinating, and I'm curious.
Y- Um, it's an interesting question because oftentimes I'm not paying attention to the mode of transportation as to how you're moving about in your dream.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm flying. That doesn't happen very often, but I think flying is pretty cool. So it's like a Superman kind of thing, but not really. It's kind of. Um, Sometimes I've been in a wheelchair. When my wife has me in a dream, I'm in a wheelchair,
Oh,
right?
interesting. Okay.
Yep. But for me, it's almost like I would say it's probably 50. It's probably 25% in a wheelchair, 75% just a non-factor. Like the leg,
Hmm.
the mode of transportation is just not part of the important part of the dream,
Prevalent
right?
to what you're even thinking about when
Yeah,
you recall
it's
the dream, right?
right,
Obviously, you don't remember your dreams unless you recall them. You're not present in that
right.
moment, like, oh, I'm dreaming that I'm having legs, like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
inception dream, maybe, but yeah, okay.
But I think that there are some times when I've had legs or they were artificial legs, like I was standing, um, but I was just another. Is not even a friend necessary, but someone I respect, and is Jeremy McGee, and he does a lot of adaptive trail riding and stuff like that, and he's got a really cool following, JP McGee, and he said when I dream, I'm not in a wheelchair because
Mm,
he had an accident that paralyzed him, so his body still kind of functions as if it's not paralyzed in his dreams, and it's just such a fascinating question to ask people when they dream. How do they move? Well, because I mean, some people fly. They're Superman in their dreams, right? But
yes,
that's
yes,
regardless of what their legs look like. They're
yes.
flying. Well, nobody really flies, and so that whole idea of what happens in your dreams and what kinds of world reality. The main term, one of the terms that I like is there's a new word that's come out, I don't know, in the past 5-6 years, and it's an adaptive athlete or an
Mm,
adaptive person. And so you can say handicapped, disabled, all these different terms, but the word adaptive seems to be I don't know, it's very accessible. It feels kind of cool to say
I like
that,
that.
right?
Hmm.
Because, like when I'm at my computer, well, I guess it's adaptive because I have a ergonomic keyboard, right? Well, that might be adaptive. Um, but when I'm moving around, I've adapted my world with a wheelchair. So I roll places. Well, when I drive a car, I've got certain adaptations. I'm an adaptive driver. But you look at someone who's a pro race car driver, there's many adaptations on their car, and they've got normal legs, but they've adapted that thing from a normal car to be a race car. So an adaptive athlete or an adaptive whatever doesn't necessarily mean overcoming a disability, but it could mean optimizing performance.
I like that term. I really like that term actually, and it is a better, obviously like disability and disabled it's dis, right? Like it's a negative connotation. You're not abled, you're disabled, right? So that sucks, right? I mean, it's just like nobody. I
Doesn't
can't
feel
imagine.
real great.
Yeah, no, it's
I
not.
remember
It's
in the
not.
Olympics on my Olympic medal, it said the category. So it was an exhibition event in 1988. They don't have exhibition events anymore in the Olympics because now they have the whole Paralympics. They have every event. It's like you could do it all. But before the Paralympics, pre 92, there was one event for men and one event for women. It was track, and 800 for women, 1500 for men, and you had to compete and do all the qualifications outside of the games, and then at the Olympics it was one race, it was the final, and it was the exhibition thing. And so I competed there, I was third place, won a bronze. And I remember on the medal, like on the side, because it's a flat metal, but it's thick. And so it had in the description, disabled wheelchair 1500. And I remember saying, if they're going to disable my wheelchair, that's inappropriate. Right? Because,
That's not fair. Yeah.
They just, I don't know, the language maybe was the barrier, but the fact that I'm disabled, in my opinion, is not the point. Someone say I was a disabled athlete, and I said I'm a wheelchair racer. So what I do is I race wheelchairs. Whether I have legs or not legs, or whether I'm paralyzed or not, those are all kind of irrelevant. The fact that we are all racing wheelchairs, and we are wheelchair racers. The point is that we're racing this vehicle. How we got in the wheelchair seemed to be sort of like irrelevant. Who cares how you got in the wheelchair? I'm a lumberjack wheelchair racer because I'm a lumberjack. Well, I don't care about your lumberjack status. I care about how fast are you in this wheelchair.
Sure.
But this is from a perspective that's it's not an able-bodied or a disabled-bodied perspective. It was someone that was born a certain way, and then I just wanted to compete. I wanted to perform. I wanted to do stuff, and categorizing the disability seemed like irrelevant. It was like, what you have to do that for?
Right. Yes. Like, obviously he's in a wheelchair. Like it's obvious, So yes, he's a wheelchair racer. Like,
Well, and here's another point, Dave. So what if you were able to cram yourself into a wheelchair and race? Why wouldn't you? Why would we prevent that? I don't think we should. Because the point isn't whether your legs work or not. The point is how fast can you push that damn wheelchair?
Yes.
That's the point. The fact that you could get out and run part of the race is irrelevant. That would be cheating. You got to stay in the wheelchair if you're going to race the wheelchair. And guess what? I personally, and this is a bit aggressive in the world of adaptive sports, they don't want able-bodied people to race in the disabled thing. And I think they're missing the point. Is the point the disability or the ability?
Sure. The ability to push whatever your limits are to achieve whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
And it's like, well, you're taking money away from people that can't run, but we're not running. We're racing wheelchairs. And guess what? For you, even though your legs work, you can feel them. And when you're cramped in that wheelchair, it ain't going to be very pretty.
No, it's not going to be comfortable at all.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
You
would
got all this
actually
extra weight.
have a higher advantage.
Yeah. You would have all this extra weight, And then you got your heart's got to push blood through all of those extra limbs and all of that stuff. So if you want to race wheelchairs because for whatever reason you fell in love with the sport and it was cool, green light, go get some.
Interesting. Yes, I wonder. I have to imagine that there has been people who have attempted it. I'm sure.
Oh, there are. I've personally trained some. I
No
had
kidding.
two roommates in college and my best friend high school, and I trained them because we were roommates, and I was training every day, and I had an extra wheelchair, and I'm like, let's set it up for you, and they're like, all right, and I actually had them enter a race. So one of them entered a race in Spokane called Bloomsday, and one of them entered a race in Seattle called Wheels of Fire, and then I actually had them both enter the same race, and they competed against each other.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's great. I love
Yeah.
that because you're just now at that point you're appreciating the sport and
Yes.
again just the ability to achieve something, uh, you know, against somebody else, and
Yeah.
regardless of if you have legs or not, it doesn't you don't need legs to to push a
No.
wheel chair. It's a
It's about
non-factor
pushing
to
the
your point.
wheelchair and your tactics and
Exactly.
your training and your aerodynamics and your nutrition and your hydration. And it's putting all that together to win a race. The fact that your legs, the fact that you use a wheelchair around life every day and your bladder doesn't work properly, why is that an issue?
Right.
Why
Right.
are we making that an issue? Well, we're taking food, we're taking money, and so here's another crazy controversy thing. So, and this is going to be crazy controversial.
I
What
can't wait.
about able-bodied? So let's just say if you have somebody that's able-bodied and they come compete and they dominate. Well, what if it's a man? This is going to be crazy. You ready for it? What if it's a transgendered woman, so a biological man claiming to be a woman, and they are competing in the women's wheelchair division?
Oh, you're
So,
taking it a step even farther then, yes. Mm-hmm.
right?
'Cause that's
So
already
now,
controversial with that.
right? But now we're having men, biological men, compete in the women's wheelchair division. Now let's
Mhm.
see if you might be all cool with your whatever, they're women because they say they're women, whatever. But then you go, whoa, 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 not so fast. You're getting in my wheelchair. Now you're taking money from me,
Yeah,
right?
right,
So
right.
are you going to go as far as you need to go to truly own that
Mhm,
methodology?
mhm.
Or maybe you have categories. Wheelchair racing is not cycling. So a wheelchair race competes against wheelchair racers, and a cycling event competes against cyclists. And so you have divisions and categories purposely to be able to categorize and make it fun to watch. And we don't have somebody with a V8, a motorcycle competing against a bicycle,
Of
right?
course.
Different categories. So that's
Mhm,
obvious. Well, maybe the categories that have been around for years where you have female, first of all, the first sports were all men,
mhm.
and women
Right,
had talent, but they couldn't compete against women
right.
in most sports. Anything with strength and power, men win because our bodies have more stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then they started saying, well, women actually can compete in swimming. And we just watched a show about the first woman to swim the English Channel and her whole
Mhm.
cool thing. It was a great show, right? And she actually did it 2 hours faster than the man's record, right? So she was actually
Wow.
faster than the man, but they didn't want her to
Mhm.
compete and all this weird stuff. But anyway, you have these women's categories to do certain sports, and they weren't really categories, but then they started to kind of compete, and then it became a division, and now women could come and compete in that division, and then the men have the men divisions. But then when you have men that for whatever we can all agree that there's something going on psychologically where there's a mismatch. I'm not placing any judgment on it, but clearly there's a mismatch going on, and that's where the disparity happens. So they believe they're a woman, but they have the goods of the man, and then they go compete against the women. And then so is it now a fair competition, or is it something different?
Sure.
Right. And so, yeah, so I haven't really talked about this, but my brain goes and comes up with these wild ideas. What if you took an able-bodied person and had them compete in the Paralympics? Well, the Paralympics, you have to have a physical disability.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends on the sport. When it's a wheelchair, you put in a wheelchair and go. Now, if it's a shot put and someone, I can see that. So it's nuanced. It's not all the same thing, but
Of course.
I just love stirring the pot a little bit and saying a transgender woman competing in a wheelchair race, the women's division, and then people's heads explode.
Of course, yeah. No, it is such it's a prevalent topic too, of course, within the last, I don't know, 4, 8 years, definitely
Yeah.
most recently because of elections and stuff too. It's a hot topic, right? It's
Yeah,
something that
of
people want
course.
to talk about. Uh, to
Well,
your
and how
point, though, I
far are
think,
we going to take? How far are we going to take the idea? And are we really all in? Or does it come a point where we go, okay, now we're just being a little bit crazy. Now we're,
yeah,
this goes too far. Well, where is that?
yeah. Who gets to be in charge of drawing the line?
And
You
up
know?
until now, we had simple lines. Biological men compete against
Right,
biological men, and
right,
biological
right.
men compete against biological men. Because when someone goes, quite honestly, and I feel very, and I'm only talking about competition in sports. I'm not talking
Yes.
about value as a human being or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm talking about a power lifter that's a man competing against a woman, I think that's there's something categorically not cool.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, there's you talk about disadvantages, advantages, fairness, right?
Yep.
That's
That
certainly
fairness is a wild word.
it is. I mean, it's yeah, what's fair and what's not fair. And I mean, it's just inherently in our human judgmental ways to be like that's fair, that's not fair. It's subjective for sure, but I guess to your point, right? Like at the end of the day, it's about pushing the limits of what's possible in sports, right? I mean, every year we're
Mm-hmm.
breaking records, we're coming up with new sports, we're trying to, just continue to elevate. And I mean, at the end of the day, the Olympics, it's sports,
It's the
it
highest
is
level.
it's the
Yep.
highest level, but it's also, I mean, it's a revenue generating thing as well, right? So there's money
Mm-hmm.
involved and stuff, which makes things very difficult.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for me, I love watching sports. I don't care who's competing. I don't care what is happening. I just want to see the best of the best compete.
Yeah.
And, I
Well,
guess,
and I agree with you there. And as soon as you realize it's kind of rigged in some way, so Jake Paul, Mike Tyson,
mm,
right? Before the fight, they didn't publish the contract and the what were the stipulations of how the money worked and what was the scenarios for payouts and all that. And
right.
I haven't seen them. I've just heard from people that
Hmm.
have saw those things. I don't even know if those are real. But when I showed up and I paid my money, and quite honestly, it was a bargain. I got a whole month worth of Netflix for,
Yeah.
for like a quarter of what I paid for pay-per-view for whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as soon as I realized, like the first minute and a half of the first round was true. That was real sport and real competition.
Hmm.
Beyond that, it got progressively more and more subjective and questionable. And by
Hmm.
the seventh and eighth round, it was let's just finish the 8 rounds because that's when everybody makes the most money.
Yeah. Yep.
And so for me, as soon as I saw like that there was some strategic choreography and the system was gamed, I wasn't interested.
Right.
Not at the same level anyway.
Of course. Yes. Yes. And you're still sticking around to watch it just to see maybe if like,
Just to
all right,
see, because I saw
they're
Tyson
gaming
when
it.
it was real. When
Yeah.
Tyson was fighting many of his people 20 years ago, it was not scripted at all. It was tear your head off power, and nobody was going, is that scripted?
Right.
No,
No, of course.
that's
No, of course.
terror and
Hmm.
fierceness. And the
Hmm.
latest thing, and I don't know if it's true, but there's this sheik that has offered 700 million for a 3-minute fight. And if Tyson were to knock out Jake Paul, he would win the 700 million. And personally, I think it's 700 million, winner takes all.
Yes. Yes.
Whoever knocks whoever out,
Yeah.
no knockouts, no money.
Nobody gets
Knockout,
anything. Yeah.
you get, because now
Right.
we're going to see real sport. Now we're going to
Yes.
see someone coming in and going, gangbusters. I'm going to rip
Yes.
your head off because I have
Right.
how much is that per second? I did the calculations. I think it's 800,000 per second or something like
Oh
that.
my gosh, that's
It's
insane.
nuts.
Yeah, it's bizarre how money definitely impacts things, but
Sure.
I do want to say that and you brought it up, so I love talking about this because I watched the fight. I was like, okay, I'm excited. This will be entertaining. But that's exactly what it was. It wasn't a sanctioned fight. It was strictly for entertainment purposes. But we all wanted to believe that it was actually going to be a real fight. And joke's on us, I
Yep.
think at the end of the day, we learned.
It was in the
We learned.
beginning, and then it turned out to be something else, and we were duped into thinking that it was something it wasn't.
Yes, yes.
And
Which
with
is, I mean,
boxing, you have more of that. When you watch MMA, no,
right,
it's pretty
right.
real.
That is,
It's
yeah,
pretty
that is
pure.
absolutely real.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I think
Yeah.
it's an interesting time for sports and everything,
It
right?
is.
Because I think that we are in a world now where there's so much attainability for people to get involved, and I love it. I was going back and kind of reading through your biography, as it were. Just, you have a great internet presence. I love it.
Oh,
I was
thanks.
looking for the Wikipedia on you. There is an Olympedia, I believe,
Yeah.
on you, which is cool.
I just had them
But
rewrite that too because there was my son saw it and there was some information that it wasn't true, and it was kind of personal information. So I wrote the guy and
okay.
I had them had fine tune it so it was accurate. And so anyway, that was something that recently was done in the last 2 months where they
Oh,
updated
no
it.
kidding. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love that. But I came to find out and read a really cool interview about you, which is great. And I will absolutely, plug that. Go and search Craig online and check out some of the interviews that he's done. But I find it fascinating because you actually wrestled when you were younger. You were not in a wheelchair. You're actually physically, out of your wheelchair on the ground. And I think that's probably one of the coolest things that I just learned about you, aside from the DJing, which we're definitely going to get into. But, um, but what was that? What was that like for you? Because I have to imagine that getting out of your wheelchair, challenging for sure. Because now, like you said, it's hard. You're wobbly. You had your knee fused with your I forgot whatever it was fused, so you were able to stand, but definitely challenging. So
Well,
why
I
did you?
crawl. I came out on all fours, so it's more like if you look at a silverback gorilla or something, where the shoulders and the
Sure,
arms are kind of up above, the back's
because
kind of at a
you have the
45.
feet. I
Yep,
mean, you have the
yeah,
feet, right?
and
So
just have
yeah,
short
I.
legs. So,
Mhm.
but you asked an interesting question. What was it like for me? Wh- Um, I was wrestling a normal person with normal looking legs that was normal as all get out. So it was normal. What was it like for my opponent?
Sure, sure, to
Very
get
different
beat.
situation.
Yes, because you had a what was it, 12-5 record
6.
or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yep.
12-6. Okay,
So
which
I
is
did win a lot of
fantastic.
matches. Well, and technically, the guy that was the state champion pinned me in 12 seconds, like he pinned everybody. He was state champion. He was,
Yeah,
little town Lowell, and he was a tough dude, right? And he figured out the strategy to take care of my puzzle, you know. And
of course.
but when I went in there to wrestle, so there was, and I don't know how much people want to geek out, but I tend to analyze stuff and get really into the minutia and the mechanics of it all. But
Of course.
for me, if I could get a hold of your wrist, that was now my wrist. You couldn't get it back. At 106 pounds, my arms were way stronger than one of my arms was way stronger than one of the other opponent's arms. So
Sure.
if I got my claws around your wrist, that was now my wrist. I get to do whatever I wanted with that.
That's awesome.
However, there was another arm and two legs. So it ended up what they gave up in strength, they made up for in leverage and stability. So, so when I was working with somebody, as soon as I grabbed their, like with my right arm, if I grabbed their arm, their right arm, well, now I'm working on two kind of legs and one arm, and my other arm is now not usable for stability.
Sure.
Well, they still have their legs to
Yes.
stabilize them. So I learned techniques like when I had them on the ground, I would reach through their legs and grab a wrist. So now I controlled legs and a wrist.
Yeah, smart. Okay.
And so I had to do those accommodating types of things. There's a move called a Navy ride. And if I could get you in a Navy ride, I wouldn't be able to pin you, but you weren't going to get away. And I was going to score points on you all day long and win the match. And I looked for the Navy ride and I used the Navy ride. And it's not really a finishing move, but for me, it allowed me to curl one arm and the legs. And then no matter where they moved, I could just move with them. And I didn't have to worry about my stability. Technically, if I would wrestle myself, the first thing I would do is I would come in and so imagine you have this gorilla in front of you and you walk up to him. I would put all of my weight on their head and just smash the face right to the ground.
Oh, okay.
Immediately, I would just go smash, zip around behind. Now I'm in the dominant position. It's going to be hard to get away. So I wore a Jason hockey mask style because sometimes when I'd shoot in, I would catch a knee in the nose, or I was thinking people would do that. Nobody ever did that strategy on me. Nobody ever smashed my face to the ground. Nobody ever did it. They actually, they were just like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And it would become stalling. If I were to be patient enough, they would get called for stalling because I would keep moving towards them and they'd keep backing up because they didn't know what to do. But I would get impatient. I would shoot in and get a partial leg, and we would say that they couldn't get their leg away. I couldn't pull it in further, and we just kind of stay there as a stalemate. That happened a lot.
Okay.
But if you could get me on my back, my neck was so strong, so I could tripod up off my neck, and then I'd put my elbows on the ground. And I had this, my arms were strong and my neck was strong. These 106 pounders could have jumped up and down on me on my chest and never pinned me.
Yeah, sure.
So the state champion, he bear hugged me, grabbed both my arms, drove my shoulders into the mat, and pinned me in about 8 seconds.
Wow. Okay.
Game over.
Because he
just figured it out. I don't know how he figured it out, but it was very effective. And I was like, what the heck just happened?
Oh man, his coach, I would imagine, was probably like, "Hey, listen up. Here's what's coming."
And it wasn't like I was a big threat, but I was a unique puzzle, and he solved it.
Sure.
That's for sure.
That's good. Well, I mean, he's state champion, and seems like well deserved, right? But
well deserved.
But I love that was something that you did, early on as a youth, right? And do you feel like you were competitive as a young person?
Oh, very competitive. I mean, did I love to compete? Yes. So I was competitive. That word is such an interesting word. Could I compete? Was I competitive? Sometimes in certain things, but do you understand the nuance of the word? Was I able to compete? Was I competitive against my peers? Depends on the sport. Did I always like to compete? Absolutely. No matter what we were doing. And, arm wrestling, not only I like to compete, I wasn't competitive. I was dominant, obviously, because if we were in the same weight class, I had a whole lot more muscle upstairs. Wrestling evened itself out because what they gave up in weight, they made up for in stability and leverage. And so that kind of was even, actually.
Okay, sure.
In swimming, I had a great swim, but I didn't have the legs to, propel me.
That.
And
that's big.
And I couldn't get the turn off the wall that was as effective. So that was slightly at a disadvantage, still did it. In bench press competitions, dominant.
Yeah, of course.
Don't, because I was
Really,
in a
any
weight class I didn't deserve to be in for the strength I had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you were so bulky,
Yeah.
upper body, and that's
Yep.
there are a lot of sports that are upper body driven, which and I guess my question was a competitive spirit, and I think that
Yeah.
obviously it's obvious, right? I mean, you are an Olympian, you are a wheelchair racer. You are an entrepreneur, like all these things that just I think require some element of competitive spirit. But you are like here's everybody's competitive spirit. Here's like pretty competitive people, and then you're like way up here, right?
Yeah.
Competing at the highest level, trying to challenge yourself, but uh, was that something just inherent as you were born? Like, were you stubborn? Were you competitively
Yeah.
spirited? Or is it something that you learned? Was it because of people telling you like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and so you wanted to prove them
Yeah.
wrong? Was that where it came from?
Combo. I would say
Okay.
combo. Initially, what drove most of it was wanting to be accepted. We all have this innate ability to want to be accepted, whether we realize it or not. And some
Right.
people have pink hair and piercings and all that stuff. And it's not
Yeah.
because they want to be shunned. It's because there's a group of people that will accept them for that. That's
Hmm.
why they do it. That's my opinion, of
Yep.
course. Pretty
I
much
would
I'm going to
agree.
state my opinions during this whole time. You could
Absolutely.
decide if
Yes.
you agree or not.
Yeah.
But I had I wanted to control the narrative. If someone was going to stare at me, they could stare at me because I didn't have legs, or because I was such a strong person, or I was so successful at XYZ. So I
Hmm.
wanted to control the narrative and not be looked on in pity or less than. And that was based because of my brokenness and, just a lot of just the reality that I grew up in a body that was different. And so I wasn't around a bunch of other people that were like me. I was around everyone that wasn't like me, at least physically, leg wise, and all that.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to make those things an advantage, not a disadvantage. And so then I behaved to accomplish that, I guess. And so with the big sports, I was obviously wanting to show that I was good enough, which came out of a brokenness in me. And so as I've gotten older, being the best at things isn't as it's not like life and death like it was. It's still fun. I love to compete, but it's not like if I'm not competitive that I have less value. But that's been through a lot of work and counseling and soul searching and prayer
Sure.
and relationships and discovery and all these different things, and just experience that my value is not based upon what I can do. And even saying that, obviously there's sometimes it is, sometimes it still is, and appropriately so. But yeah, it's like, well, and the other thing too is that my competitive spirit and my desire to excel physically is I'm able to push my body to the point where it breaks,
Hmm.
actually and literally. And so when I'm out there competing and it hurts, and I don't really like that it hurts, but I'm okay with it, and I'm going faster up the hill than anybody else, but it's hurting like crazy. I assume it's hurting them like crazy, but I'm faster, so it's worth it.
Sure.
Well, you get to a point after all these years where I've had four shoulder surgeries and one elbow
Hmm.
surgery, and my muscles became every year strength training, growing stronger. Stronger is better, as much as you can get, amino acids and nutrition and all the things I do with my coaching and help other people do, and applying all those to myself. And I get to the point where my muscles were stronger than the tendons' ability to attach to the bone. So I
Hmm.
started pulling tendons off of bones, which this is not
Jeez.
just me. Lots of bodybuilders do this. This is a
Sure.
thing.
Yeah, it's
And
part of
so
the
then I
job, right?
realized maybe my muscles are too strong. and maybe my will to win and push my body isn't just a matter of enduring pain. There's actually destruction happening. And so I'm just going through 3 surgeries this year, 2024. Right. 2 rotator cuff surgeries on the same shoulder and an elbow surgery. And I still wearing a brace and I can't lift my shoulder up because I'm still recovering from all that. But so this is a year of reconsidering the things that I've always thought to be true, kind of your non-negotiable, the things that are just true. And what I believed for so many years is that if I can endure it and do it and achieve it, my body would grow stronger from it. And it didn't matter if it hurt or whatever. That was the price you paid, but there wasn't irreparable damage happening. It was just pain, just the simple whatever pain. But this kind of pain, and even though I have pain, there's lack of function that can, in certain aspects, never get better. And so now we crossed the line to a whole different, now it's independence and it's lifestyle and freedom and independent and all that stuff. And so I'm recalibrating my whole life to sometimes you can go too hard and break stuff. You know, I think of people like David Goggins, right? Where he says, you can't hurt me and all this stuff. And I think, how is he still able to push himself and not just explode or implode? Maybe he does. I don't know, but I'm just wondering, I'm not going to go back and push myself like that to bust my shoulder up again. No way.
Right. Yeah. You, at some point, you matured to the point where you realize what's more important to you. And I like that you said it at the beginning of the pod, right? Being adaptive. And I think that goes to even say today, right? Where you are choosing maybe intelligence over strength. And I mean, that's such a generalized thing to say, but now you are like, okay, I am no longer in my physical prime. Now it's time to adapt to being competitive in ways that I can still do things like, helping people, being the best, business owner that I can be, type of thing, being a better husband, being a better father, whatever it is, right? Like the things that I think really do matter and are important in life, but we lose
tactics.
Sight of. Yeah,
it's really it's adjusting your strategy and choosing different tactics to still achieve and excel. And now it's not just performance and ripping people's heads off, but it's, maybe training other people. I want to be able to obviously drive and be able to care for myself and shower myself and, on into my 90s, versus if I'm not careful, it could be a power chair and, a permanent aid.
Sure.
And that doesn't sound, I would adapt to that, of course. But my preference is not to have that.
Sure. Weighing the pros and cons of that life versus what you have or what you envision to be in the future. I love that. Well, man, there's so many things I want to talk about in regards to just the competitive physical aspects of you. I love that you talked about arm wrestling. I do want to go down that road, but we can talk about it. We'll do another pod. It's crazy, but I everybody I've interviewed, I'm like, we got to do a part 2 because there's just so much to uncover here. So many legendary aspects of you. But I do want to talk about your business, and I find that really fascinating as well because you've taken what you've learned over many, many years from, health, wellness, coaching, and flip that into, being an entrepreneur, being a businessman. And I'm curious, when did that light bulb click for you where you're like, I'm gonna become my own boss. I'm gonna become an entrepreneur.
It's, from the standpoint of racing and, you're an independent, athlete, agent, you're promoting yourself, you're racing, you're achieving results, and then you're marketing yourself to companies that will sponsor you. Nike, many Nike's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Comcast, AT&T. There's a number of them, Oakley, a number of these different companies that sponsored me over the years. And so you're kind of self-employed, well, very much self-employed, and then you go get your first job. And my first job like that wasn't, it was in sales, and it was technology sales. I liked technology. And so actually my first day on the sales was Black Friday, back in like 2000, I don't know, 1998, whatever, ways ago, And I had like 3 weeks of training, and then that was my first, imagine being it was a future shop. It's kind of like a Best Buy, and your first day is Black Friday, and it's just crazyville.
Nothing like putting your feet to the fire. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay, hold on. I want to ask you this though, because it's something that I thought about. But these idiomatic expressions of like, "Hey, babe, I'm gonna run out to the store," like, or putting your feet to the fire. Like,
feet to the fire. Yep.
Yeah. Do these
Oh,
bother you at all?
No, don't bother me at all. I want to pause and take advantage of the humor in it all, because I was going to say, well, maybe more like my hand rim or my wheel to the fire, right? But and it's there is some funny things when it comes to that when I'm in a group of people, and I make jokes and leg jokes and pun kind of silly dad jokes and whatever. When somebody else in the group that knows me well makes a joke, people don't see this. I see it. And it's fascinating. As soon as they make the joke, like, "Are you short on time?" Everybody in the group will look at me to say, and the question is, was that funny? Can we laugh? And if I laugh, they all laugh. And if I don't laugh, they don't laugh. But they all immediately look at me to be the decider as to whether that was funny or not. Obviously, it's quite funny. Some of the stuff is quite funny. And that is just a very interesting sociological dynamic that I noticed that you would never see.
Sure.
I don't think you would notice that. And so the humor, the being around people, and then there's times when people forget that I'm in a wheelchair quite quickly. And sometimes my wheelchair's in the back of the car. We're at a different city, and we traveled together, and they took my wheelchair apart, Well, they get out of the car and they start walking in, and I'm like, and then they'll come back and I forgot I needed to get your wheelchair out front. And then I could probably get out and get it myself too, but it depends whether it's raining or whatever.
Of course,
And so they forget that I'm in a wheelchair quite quickly. My son, my youngest boy, got lost in a department store or at church or some type of thing. And I think it was church. And they said, "Well, what does he look like?" And he said, "Well, he's white. He's wearing a blue shirt, and he's got, and then when they found me, he didn't use 'I'm in a wheelchair' as a descriptor for what dad looked like." And the person found me and said, "I have a funny story to tell you. When I asked your son to identify what his dad looked like, the one thing he left out was the wheelchair." And that would have been the most obvious thing that would have clued me into who I'm talking to.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's that was just such a unique experience. It was just purity. It was just,
Yeah,
he didn't.
unconscious
I'm just dad.
thinking,
The fact that I use a wheelchair is the same as you use a car to drive around in, whatever.
Right.
He's got a white car. Irrelevant. How is that helping me find my dad?
Right.
So anyway, those are just some kind of those funny euphemisms where people will say, and I've come up with a few, like when I come up to somebody that is missing an arm, and I'll say, I was thinking of asking you for a hand, but it looks like you got a leg up on me. And it's kind of funny, and maybe they would get it, but most people think those things are pretty funny. And it's even funny the people that don't think it's funny, actually. the people that would get upset at a joke like that is also funny because it's like
The
simmer
fact that
down.
they get offended by it
Yeah,
is funny
you've
too.
got two legs. Why are you offended on my behalf?
Right.
Why don't you
Yes.
get a life? So
It's true. It's true. I love that you've just had to again adapt through life to accommodate this way of being from people, right? And you can either choose to be offended by it or find the humor in it. And honestly, life is much
exactly,
better when you're laughing, in
it
my
is.
opinion.
Yep.
So
You
I
can be
like that you have that.
offensive, and I can still choose not to be offended.
Sure.
There's
Yes.
a wild
Yeah.
idea. Try that one on for size.
Yeah, exactly. But sorry, I had to sidebar that because that was something that I was thinking about as I was preparing for the pod, and I was just thinking about all these idiomatic things that I would say normally of just like,
Oh,
oh
it
yeah,
happens all the
so
time. They said,
yeah,
"Man, that cost me an arm and a leg,"
yeah,
and I'm like, "Whoa, that's expensive. I can't afford that." And
right.
I play on the words, and they're like, "What?" And we said it was going to cost you an arm and a leg, and I don't know if I can spare an arm or a leg. You know,
That's great. I
yeah,
love it. Well, I appreciate you sharing just it occurs to you, but also, yeah, I mean, just providing encouragement to other people. Like, hey, just be normal.
yeah.
Don't act weird
Simmer down,
around.
enjoy life. Yeah.
Good. So yeah, back to just your entrepreneurial and your business, acumen. And it's yes, you have kind of been an entrepreneur since the very beginning, right? Having to advocate for yourself, having to market yourself, and so you've taken those tools now and started your business. And how long have you been doing? It's Optima, right?
Yeah, Crave Optimal Health
Crave
is
Crave
the
Optimal, yes.
yeah, yeah. That's the my business name
Your
and
coaching.
coaching. Yeah, and coaching in business, coaching in personal health, coaching in relationship health, um, coaching in a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
And so I have a series of tools and platforms that I've you know, appreciated or drawn to that have been cool. So I have certain products that I like to recommend. I have certain workout strategies that I like to recommend. I have certain equipment, technology, Crave Optimal Tech. I love Apple technologies and when I first started selling computers, Apple wasn't the favored, child. It was
Sure.
PCs and Windows,
Yeah,
and
Windows.
we
Hmm.
called them switchers. And there was a whole ad campaign. Yeah, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, and it had this whole advertising campaign out. And so, talking to people about the benefits and the values of working with Apple products and why it's not just a different brand computer, but what's the fit and finish and the ergonomics and how it can accelerate your performances in efficiency, and you can get more done and you spend less time chasing the tech and the viruses and all the other stuff, the updates. I had a lady the other night, she was getting ready for a we were doing a webinar with 12 people were in this webinar, and she couldn't get her computer to log into Zoom. So she went to restart it, and then Windows had an update. And that could take 30 minutes, 30 seconds, or
Uh-huh.
5 hours. You
Right,
just don't
right.
know. You just see the thing. And I'm like,
Yep.
what bad timing was that? Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And
it
so,
happens.
just different ideas of that. But yeah, so I work with people. So I have a coaching practice where I coach clients on optimal health and wellness and things like that. I have a series of tools that I use. And then, um, and then I also mentor people and I help them develop their own coaching practice and help them design and figure that out. I work with companies on optimal health and wellness with their teams. I worked with a company recently, and they wanted me to take their team through a book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and so I developed 5 different talks, and I talked to their leadership team on that, and I do some public speaking and some motivational speaking, and I run it's called the National Wheelchair Sports Camp, and it's been going on since I believe 1987, and so been 37 years,
That's awesome.
um, and that's back in Rochester, Minnesota. So I put on a full week's program once a year, And we have people come in from all over and just have this amazing, it's like 6 years old to 80 years old. So it's a wide gamut of ages and abilities and all that. And so I love to create community, and I love to give people a voice. And so if I'm ever in a meeting, oftentimes I'm going to be asking questions and calling people out and getting their input, because I want to have collaboration in the community and not just me, giving a message, which I can do that too. But I like to really draw people out and draw them into the minutia of it all, have ownership over it. So been doing coaching, wellness coaching for 14 years, and doing general coaching for I'd say probably 20, 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that something that you're passionate about doing, or was this just kind of like path of least resistance? Like, hey, I've got all of these, excellent accolades. I think I am a subject matter expert in some of these realms. So this seems like a good path to go down.
Yeah, that's
Were you?
interesting. Believing you're a subject matter expert, you have to become. I mean, if somebody wanted to ask me about how to win races, or how to go fast down a hill, I am absolutely a subject matter expert. I know quite a bit about how to make a wheelchair go fast,
Yes.
how to make the human body go fast, how to work through the strategies and the tactics and the techniques and the aerodynamics and all of that, the wheelchair design and all that. Yeah, I would say I know quite a bit about that stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff I'm still learning about, the mindset and the narrative in your brain, and when you hear something, and of course, current events, we just had an election. And there were certain people that were uplifted and were encouraged by the outcome. And there's certain people that their world ended. And there's certain people that felt like their world was ending, but actually nothing has changed. Literally, the president-elect is not president yet.
Right.
Technically, the day after the election, nothing actually changed.
Right.
They worked for the same company. They drank the same coffee. They went to the same bathroom. They wore the same clothes. They drove the same car. They had the same friends. All of the sunrise happened and the sunset happened. The birds sang the same songs. Nothing actually changed, but their world ended, and they literally lost their minds. And that's the kind of stuff that I like to talk about the story we make up and then the facts.
Sure.
Because the narrative and the meaning of the facts is where I think you find sometimes the greatest flourishing and the greatest suffering.
Yeah.
Is the context of what you say about those facts. And I do a lot of work with people on what we call the drama triangle: victim, being a villain, or being a rescuer. And it's very popular to be a victim in today's world.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
it's a sucky life. It sucks. Because here's an example. So I use a wheelchair, and so I don't just pop in the driver's side door. I get in the back hatch, pull my wheelchair in, close the hatch, crawl over the seats, then I'm in the car. It takes me 3 times as long as it takes you to get in the car. Okay? But getting out of the car is the same. Driving is probably, we'll just say that's the same. We're going to drive the same roads, whatever. So if I show up to a meeting, maybe it's a job interview or something, or closing a deal on it with a client, and I show up 20 minutes late, I can say, well, it takes me longer because of my wheelchair. And they'll say, totally get it. They'll give me a pass, but they won't give me the job. I'll get a pass, but I won't get a job.
Right.
And I can show up with excuses, and people will give me, we call it pulling the disabled card. And I can play my disabled card. I gotta, I can play that card at Disneyland. I can play that card many places. And I'll get a pass with the disabled card. But I still have the life of a disabled mind. And so I get the pass, but I still have this crappy life. I get all of the junk that comes with the being a victim. Or I can leave the house 7 minutes earlier than you do and show up on time, accommodate for my shortcomings, and I get to live that life.
Yes.
So being a victim may make you feel good, but you're still a victim.
Yes. 100% of the time. No, I love that you say that, and I think that that's powerful, especially in today's. You're right. Just mental climate. People are certainly having trouble taking accountability. I would say for sure, and just leveraging that victim card.
Well, think about that. You have trouble taking accountability for your life, so then you live a life without accountability.
Yeah, it's a circle too, right?
Yeah.
That you can't break out of until you change your
You're
mindset.
stuck. Yeah.
And that's kind of the work that you're helping people break through. It sounds like a lot.
Yeah,
Let me
I
ask
love
you-
that work because literally you can go from victimhood to accountability and to success with just a mind shift. But oftentimes we can't think in these new ways until someone exposes us to the idea that there's another way to think. And when we get exposed to that idea, we go, first of all, wait a minute. Is that true? That's different. It's different, but is it true? Well, I don't know yet. I'm gonna think about that. But you got a new idea, and then you go, well, let me just test it out. Let me try it on for size. This person that's tailgating me, hates me, wants to try and ruin my life and kill me, or they're just in a bigger hurry than I am, and I'm just the car in front of them. What if I just took a breath, moved over? I bet you they're going to drive right on by.
Right.
Two narratives. Facts are the same. Tailgating.
Right.
How am I going to view
it.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Creating the stories that people create. And we're all guilty of it, but it's
me
hard
too.
because I think it's something that we learn to do very, very early on. And so how do you help people kind of break out of that, right? It's like you're living in this life for so long. It's muscle memory almost for us to just revert back to that same way of being. So is it just constant learning and coaching and trying to continue to work on it, I guess?
Yeah, it's practice, but it's challenging the narrative. So let's say finances are showing up poorly, something like that. And you can say, well, what does it really mean? What are the facts? Because you can get, actually in the positive, sometimes people say, oh, you're going to get a promotion next year. Immediately your day's better. Nothing's changed.
Yes.
You don't have any more cash today.
Right.
But the promise of something can be a benefit for us, even though nothing's changed, or you're going to be laid off, but you're not laid off today and you're having a horrible day. So let's look at the facts and let's question the narrative and let's try and get out of the drama. Now, drama in our own life is messy. So drama, victim, villain, hero. So victim, why can't I catch a break? Everything's always happening to me. Man, why don't I ever get, a villain is someone's to blame. Someone's going down, right? And then the hero is I'm gonna fix your life and prevent you from learning. So I'm gonna come in and rescue you from this ticket that you just got, rather than allowing you to have the consequences of paying the ticket. So victim, villain. Now, when you're watching, they call it drama in TV and movies, Marvel Universe, drama, victim, villain, hero, all over the place. It's fun to watch. it's just not very fun to live. So
Yeah.
consume your drama on TV and don't live it.
Clip that. That's going on one of the reels, man. That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. I like how you say that. And I want to ask you, do you have any formalized, I don't want to call it training, but have you what was your aha moment to discover this?
Oh yeah, it's the ongoing. Every year I go to 2 or 3 conferences. I have mentors in my life. There's books. When you read a book, it's so here's another. Books are life's shortcuts. When you read someone's work, only the important stuff gets put in that work. So you can talk about a lot of crazy stuff in a podcast and it can go all over the place, but you're not going to write all that stuff in a book, at least not a bestseller. They're going to get to the point and they're going to be, if you want to learn this, here's the fastest way to learn it, not here's the slowest way to learn it. Just because of the medium. So I find when I read, and reading's not easy. I don't read all the time, but when I do read, that seems to me to be the biggest. I get the most out of the shortest time. So if you want to grow your experience and you want to grow your abilities, read. Now, when I say read, that includes Audible. That includes a lot of ways of consuming that curated content that's intentional. And so my wife, I think she's listened to 200 books this year.
Good for her.
And,
Wow.
And she listens to them at a faster than, 1.6, whatever.
Yeah.
And she just consumes the stuff. A lot of it's fiction, some of it's nonfiction. But that's when you want to think about what is the shortest way to a better life. I think it's reading. It's a fast way to learn. So I've done a lot of reading. I'm reading more now than ever. I go to conferences, listen to different speakers. The Drama Triangle is a group called the Conscious Leadership Group. And, read his book, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And took me a year to get through that book. And I had to think about some of those concepts in there because they were very different than how I interacted with the world. And I thought, is this true? I don't know if this is true. And as I tried some of these ideas on, I went, that seems to be, I don't know, true or not true, but it seemed to be favorable. It seemed to be, because good and bad, right and wrong, true, false, but it seemed to be like when I started looking through these ideas, I preferred the experience than these ideas. So it was a preference that I liked better. And so anyway, tons of mentorship. And I think of this visual of someone standing in the middle and they are reaching up and grabbing someone's hand and they're reaching down and back and grabbing someone's hand. So they're mentoring somebody and they're being mentored. And the person they're mentoring reaches their hand down and so it's be mentored and mentor. And I think that's a great visual.
I think that is a really great visual. I think you need to jump on AI and get that image generated, man.
Nice.
Yeah. It's hard to do AI generation still. I love that it exists, but it's not perfected
It's the
yet.
wild, wild west out there for sure.
It is still.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I appreciate you're talking about mentorship. That definitely seems to be a common thread amongst most of my guests, which I love because I am a huge proponent for being a mentor, being a mentee. And so I love that you're calling that out as well and just reinforcing that because that is a very common thread. So I love the conversation. I wish we could talk for another 2 hours. I know you're a wicked busy guy, so we'll kind of get this wrapped up, but I do want to, give you an opportunity here to, I guess, how can people find you and
Sure.
what kind of people are you looking for to coach and those types of
Yeah.
things.
Well, I like the idea of a performance coach or somebody that wants to perform at a higher level. And, you can think about if you say, well, if you look at your life and you go, it's pretty good, great. If it could be better, faster, stronger, leaner, whatever, what would it look like if it was, if you're running at a 7, what does a 9 look like? Because 7's pretty great, especially if you're around a bunch of 4s.
Yeah, sure.
But what would it look like to have and I'm not talking about possessions. What would it look like if your marriage was a 7 and it became a 9?
Mm-hmm.
What if your closeness with your spouse went from a 7 to a 9 or a 4 to a 6? What if you were stronger? What if you had more energy? What if you enjoyed laughter more? What if you had one more friend? What if you got better gas mileage in your car? I mean, I don't know what it is, but what are these things where you can take and say, yeah, this is what it is, but how could I polish that? How could I optimize that? And I love optimizing people's lives. I did that with racing for years. I took a wheelchair and I'm like, it's pretty good. Let's go from, it's a 7, let's make it a 9. We got to shave this off. We got to polish that. We got to tune this. But you can go to Crave Optimal Health or craveoptimal.com. And that's a way that, you can book into I call them a life mapping session or basically a discovery session. I do those for free. I give people a little bit of time, get to know people. Totally fun. Of course, I'm on all the socials, TikTok and Instagram, LinkedIn, Crave Optimal, or just my name, Craig Blanchette. And you'll find me on that. It's really strange sometimes when I meet with somebody and they'll say, I Googled you. And I'm like, oh, and they're like, I had no idea. And it's just, I don't know if it's just some people do that and some people don't. But when I meet somebody, I rarely Google them. But, you can Google me and there's some stuff.
There's some really fantastic content in there, and it really, I guess, uncovers. It is, I don't know. I get your point, right? Like, let me meet you where I'm at today versus what this article said about me 7 years ago, right? I'm a different person now today. So I get what you're saying, but I do love that you have such an awesome online presence, especially with your current socials. You're out there, in front of people, providing really great value, really great content. I've definitely benefited from just watching you, doing your stuff. So yeah, Craig, I mean, you're up to big things.
You never really know. So when you hear that, it's always great to hear because, you throw it out there and you hope you're adding value. And that's great feedback.
No,
I have a ministry
really
too.
Cool.
There's a nonprofit ministry, intercept.works. And that is a nonprofit ministry that I started about 21 years ago. It's a men's ministry for ending destructive behaviors and flourishing marriages and stuff like that. And so I've been doing that for quite a while. And that's so great to see a husband and wife reunite and flourish. This is fantastic.
I love that. That's important too. Relationship management is so difficult in this day and age when, both parties are working and, two ships passing in the night. That stuff exists in a way worse way than it ever has. But an opportunity to grow, to your point, go from a 7 to a 9 or a 4 to a 7, whatever it is that they're looking for. It sounds like you have learned a lot of tools to help people get there, both from personal experience, but also your own, educational path, which I love. And so,
and if you're one thing that I would say is if you're an HR director or somebody in HR and you have an opportunity where you want your team to be inspired, there's some inspiration that'll happen, but inspired, challenged, and uplifted. I love coming into businesses and working with the staff and developing something and helping them. Because oddly enough, when you see me show up in a wheelchair with super short legs, and then it happens, you go, what were my problems again? What was my excuses again? And so just by showing up, they get that message. But then there's content too. there's ways and tools that you can start mapping your life out, and you can start, you can start working for that, or that 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, everything that you've created in your life and the things that you didn't create, you just happen to be born with, demand attention from people, which is great because not only were you born with some of this stuff that just demands attention because people are going to pay attention to you, but also the things that you have created yourself, also, your successes that you've done with, being an Olympian and just being a racer, being all of these things, I think are fantastic. And which is why you are on the Legends podcast. You are 100% legend, Craig. And I want to end the pod. We're going to have to talk about DJing another time because, man, we don't have enough time. But I do want to ask you a question. This is a question I ask to all my guests. And I want to ask you, to you, what makes a person legendary?
It's such an interesting term. There's a guy that's in Australia, and he says, "Hey, legend," and I've known him since he was, since he was like 12, and it just it felt so good to be called that. But then I had to think, what does that mean, And I guess what I would say is what makes someone legendary is that they've made an impact on humanity. They've made an impact in the world. There's been sacrifice, there's been growth, all of that, but then they use that to make an impression on someone else, to try and leave the world upgraded in whatever way, small or large. But I would say a legend is for someone that takes what they have and they use it for the betterment of others.
Brilliant. I love that. And you embody that, man. It's funny how you think about it out externally, but you oftentimes end up checking those boxes, which is super cool. And I love asking that question because I'm like,
It's a great
people
question.
don't even realize. They're like, I'm like, by the way, you just described yourself. And they're like, oh, wow. Huh.
Is that
That's
common,
cool.
the answer? They kind of describe what they think?
Yes, but everybody's giving me a different and unique answer. So it's very cool. And eventually, I don't know, probably around episode 25, I'll compile all of the answers into something. But yeah, man, it's a super cool question. But Craig, thank you so much for spending the time with us today, my friend. You are absolutely awesome, and I'm so glad that we got to chat. Again, I'll probably reach out to you. We're going to do a part 2 because there's so much more to uncover.
Sure.
But yes, folks, please go check out his socials. Please go check out website and, go follow Craig. He's up to big things, continuing to do big things. But yeah, Craig, again, I appreciate you. Have a wonderful post-Thanksgiving Black Friday. And I'm sure we'll talk again. But until the next time, folks, thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, stay legendary.